Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Is the volume okay? I gotta bring my hand pretty close to the microphone. Yeah? You want me to just yell? I can yell. It's Fajar time, so someone else is gonna have to wake me up. Yeah. Is that a bit better? Okay. Assalamu alaikum everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you all here in New Jersey, and coming from Canada, it's nice that the weather is a couple of degrees warmer here, so that's been a nice change. Alhamdulillah. Today's talk is quite an important one for the Muslim community. A bit of background about myself. I did my medical training in Toronto, and I work as a doctor at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. Thank you. And I did general practice, and I did a focus in addictions and mental health specifically. And I'm here along with Nasiha, which is an organization I'll tell you a bit more about in just a moment. But right now I wanted to take a moment for you guys to just imagine. We have to use our imaginations here because maybe we haven't seen this before. But let's say you went to the emergency department, and let's say you're a doctor or you're a family member and someone calls you in to see someone, and it's a 30-year-old sister who is hallucinating, who's been hearing voices, has been seeing things, thinks there's like insects crawling along the walls, is talking to those voices, telling them to go away, and you find out there's a history of drinking alcohol, right? Drinking a lot of alcohol, and they come in and they tell the doctor to come by, see this woman to help treat her because she's having withdrawal symptoms because she stopped. And you go in, and as you walk into that room, you hear Ayatul Kursi playing in the background on a YouTube video while she's talking to these voices. Right? In another scenario, I want you to imagine a 21-year-old boy who's also in the hospital. He's having a lot of chest pain. He feels like he's going to die. He's breathing really fast. He's feeling anxious. He's sweating. He's in handcuffs as well. And the police brought him in to be seen by the doctor. In another scenario, I want you to imagine a 19-year-old boy who was feeling really, really low and really helpless and decided to go and visit the doctor one day. And that day, he tells the doctor that, I've been Googling the exact angle that I need to direct a certain weapon at my body so I can end my own life. Which sounds quite scary to imagine, In another scenario, I want you to imagine a 12-year-old boy who has, in his time in school, been made fun of for being fat. He's been beaten up by his friends. He looks in the mirror and he struggles to smile because of the way he feels about himself. And in another scenario, I want you to imagine, a young boy, maybe 15 years old. He had a little accident while playing basketball, fractured his foot. He's limping, he's wearing crutches, he has a cast on his legs. Lots of people have signed that cast, he's gotten a lot of support. And I tell you all to imagine, these quite scary kind of scenarios, because maybe the last one is the only one we've seen before, someone in a cast, someone who's had a cast that's been signed. But the reality is that all of these scenarios are something that exists in the Muslim community and probably within our own community too. We just don't get to really witness them. And so the point of today's talk is to really shed light on the importance of mental health and the reality that it's a struggle that all of us face and that exists in our communities even if people don't really talk about it. Now before I dive into the talk itself, I wanted to tell you a bit about Nasiha. I'm just going to dive into this slide over here, just as a visual. Nasiha is a Muslim mental health organization. We're a charity that supports communities and individuals through three big things. One is we have a helpline, and that's really how Nasiha started. So we operate 15 hours a day right now, 7 days a week. People can call our helpline and speak to a peer support counselor if they're going through crisis, going through a struggle, feel like they have nobody to talk to. Most of our callers, they may not have spoken to anyone about the issues they bring up, and they call us because they wish to speak to someone. So we offer a text-based helpline and a phone-based helpline. We also do a lot of education and outreach, so we do presentations at schools, at Masjid, at community centers, to let people know about the resources that are out there, and also to shed light on the struggles that exist in the community. And then in Canada, we have a web therapy program, so we provide free counseling services to people who are in need, and we're trying to bring that here to the United States as well. We have a booth at the back, so if you want more information at the end of the talk, you're welcome to go there, pick up our brochures, pick up our bookmarks and things like that. If there's even just one thing you take away from today, even if it's not like giving a donation or picking up a bookmark or anything, it's just write down the number, which is in the logo, it's 1866 and then CIHA. You can pick up a bookmark for that. If you don't use the number, at least sharing that number with somebody who might need it one day, I think can go a long way in supporting the community. So we're going to dive into, it's a pretty heavy topic. I know it's not like a fun or exciting thing necessarily to talk about, but I want us to really dive deep here so we can understand this a bit better. A quick gauge of the audience. How are you feeling right now? Awesome. The funniest answer I always get from people when I ask how are you doing is alhamdulillah. And that can be anything from the range of like, I'm doing the best I've ever been doing my entire life, to life is absolutely dreadful, but I'm just pushing through, right? This is a full spectrum, but alhamdulillah, right? We are grateful for the circumstances we are in. At the same time, we can also be struggling in those very circumstances as well. And this is an exercise I want to do. I know we just prayed Fajar, but I think it's a good one to do because there was a time when I was teaching Quran classes a while back. I was covering for my brother, and I started doing this exercise with the kids. And they ranged in age from like 5 years old to like 16, 17 years old. And they're very, very rowdy. MashaAllah, the kids here are very like, you guys are calm, collected, it's good. Some of those kids were running around the back when I was leading prayer, they're throwing their kufis at the back and stuff like that. One time I was recording it just for fun to see what happens, and they're just beating up each other, they're throwing kufis and stuff like that. So I was like, oh my goodness, how do I tame the children here and get them to calm down for a second, So this is what I started to do with the Masjid students, which felt bizarre. I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this with Masjid kids, but I was like, I need to figure out a way. And the management would yell at me, actually, or not yell, but the closest thing to yelling, saying, Dr.Taha, you're a little too gentle with the kids. We need you to be more strict with them. And I was like, I can't. It's just not my style. So I didn't want to do that. And so this is the closest thing I got to calm down a group of rowdy teenagers and young boys and girls as well. So now we're going to do it as adults and young children, everybody alike, and I'll do it too. So for this exercise, it's an exercise in something called mindfulness. Has someone heard of mindfulness before? If you've heard of it before, you raise your hands. Okay, good, like a decent 20-30%. We all do it actually if we pray Salah properly. It's an act of mindfulness in and of itself. We're going to do a very concerted, actionable version of that right now. So while you are listening to my voice, I actually want you to just take a look at kind of where you're sitting and how you're sitting and get into the most comfortable position you can while you're seated, whether it's crossing your legs, stretching your legs out, whatever way you feel most comfortable. And as you get comfortable, you can adjust yourself however you like. Start to pay attention to your breathing. And really just pay attention to your breathing. For a lot of people, I actually say to close your eyes. You can either look down at the floor so you have less distractions, or literally just close your eyes. And if it helps, I'll close my eyes to make it easier for everyone else to follow. Just close your eyes so that you have less visual distractions around you. And pay attention to your breathing. And if you can, try to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And as you pay attention to your breathing, notice the cool air that comes in through your nostrils. And then the warm air that flows out as you breathe out. And just pay attention each time you take a deep breath in. And notice how every time you breathe out, it just happens without you thinking about it. And take a deep breath in. And a breath out. And if you you catch your mind wandering to other places, just gently bring it back to your breathing. The cool air coming in through your nostrils, the warm air coming out from your mouth. Notice how your chest expands as you take a breath in, and how it contracts as you take a breath out. Now, as you do this, with each time you breathe in, gently in your head say, Subhanallah. And as you breathe out, Alhamdulillah. As you breathe in, Subhanallah. And as you breathe out, Alhamdulillah. As you breathe in, Subhanallah. As you breathe out, Alhamdulillah. And if you struggle, just bring your focus back to your breathing and keep going. And when you feel ready, you can slowly bring your focus back to the room around us, open your eyes, and just receive. And just bring yourself back to the gathering. How do you guys feel after doing a little exercise? Some people feel sleepy. You know, when I was an undergraduate, we used to do this as well. We used to bring a yoga mat to class, and our teacher would get us to go in whatever position we felt comfortable, whether it was seated or lying down. So I used to lie down and do it, and then fall asleep. And then he would just say, you know, let your body do whatever it wants to do in that moment, because that's what you need in that moment. And every Wednesday that we had it, once a week, I was the guy who would be snoozing and snoring. I was like, Taha never gets enough sleep. He's always falling asleep during this exercise. There's no expectation, right? The idea is just to be aware. And, you know, I did this exercise because really, it's such an important practice, and modern science and modern psychology talks about mindfulness, does a ton of research on this concept of mindfulness. And really, in Islam, we have this inherently built into our deen, to be mindful. In dhikr, in prayer, in reading Quran, in listening to Quran, and all these things that we do, it's an inherent part of our deen, but sometimes we don't recognize, you know, that what purpose it's really serving for us. And sure, research proves that to us, but we know from our faith that inherently it's something we're meant to do. If you want to look at research studies, there's so many benefits about doing things like mindfulness, whether it's 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day. We do it 5 times a day, right? In addition to making dua and reading Quran and all the other things we do. It helps people in terms of less anxiety, less depression, improved focus, improved ability to, you know, feel energized in the day. Like, there's so many benefits. I don't have to list them all to you guys, but I would remember this practice as an important one to also try to do when we're praying as well. Now, when it comes to you know, the helpline itself and what we get calls about, I've listed a few things up here like depression, anxiety, trauma, loneliness, suicidality. You know, there's a lot of issues that exist in the Muslim community, but the challenge is there's so much stigma related to this that people don't feel comfortable enough to really reach out or seek help. But when they do, it's at a point where things have gotten really, really, really bad, right? And just to throw some statistics at everyone, just so you have numbers in mind, right? 20% of youth are affected by mental illness. By age 40, half of the population will have had some form of mental illness, right? So you flip a coin, there's a 1 in 2 chance by age 40. In Canada and the United States, about only 1/5 of children actually receive appropriate mental health services. That's 80% that don't. Right? Another really important fact is regarding suicide. So it's the number 2 leading cause of death among 15 and 34-year-olds. Does anyone know what the number 1 cause is? What was that? Accidents. That's right. Car accidents, right? So that's not like heart disease. It's not cancer. It's something that happens accidentally, right? And then the next closest thing is something that is self-induced, which is really, really sad, and also really important for us to be aware of that this happens in our community. Every 12 minutes, someone in the world dies by suicide. Women are 2 to 3 times more likely to attempt, but men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide. In 2022, just last year, 40,000 people in the United States. And the Muslim community is not immune to this. Right? Quick stats, I know it's who put stats up at 7 in the morning, but I found this graph from CDC. And this is the number of deaths by suicide, from January to December of last year. It's hovering at almost 4,000 every single month. Right? There's a lot. There's a lot. I'm going to skip here. I want to jump over to this slide here. What do you guys think are some of the biggest barriers for seeking support? Why do Muslim youth not go out and seek support? What makes it hard for them to just be like, I need help. I want someone to speak to. I'm struggling. Anyone know?
Some of the negative stigmatism surrounded by mental health issues in the Muslim community.
Absolutely. So negative stigma, right, surrounding mental health. Any other answers? Yeah?
They don't know who to call, who to talk to.
Right, that is a huge one. Who do I talk to? Who do I call? What does seeking help even look like in the first place, right? It's like, okay, if you break your leg or something, you go to the emergency department, you get your cast and whatever, but what if I'm struggling and I feel low? Who do I talk to?
Thinking that it can just find all the answers online.
Right, thinking, the answers, I'll Google it, I'll figure it out, I'll push it through. There's a big one among men. Can anyone guess? I mean, stigma was a big part of it. What happens? Ego? Ego. Right. This idea that I gotta tough it out, be a man, push through it. Real men don't cry. There's all these perceptions that go on in the community. Why do men die 3 times more than women do by suicide? That's a serious problem. That's a serious problem. So there's a lot of reasons this happens, and I know it's a dark topic, but the whole point is a shift towards, taking action here. I've listed a few of them here: stigma, language barriers. A big thing is like this whole trust in God paradigm. This idea that people almost use faith as a crutch. This idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of you, and if you're grateful, then everything will be okay. You can be grateful and still be struggling. Those don't have to be mutually exclusive, right? People are extremely grateful, but can still be going through a really tough time. One big piece of advice that I tell people, is to ask those who are struggling, is there anything that you wish I knew about you, that maybe I don't know about you, that if I knew that, it would help me support you better? And then we should also ask ourselves, is there anything I should know about so-and-so that will help me support them better? Another piece I want to talk about is trauma, because I think trauma is a really important topic, and again, the Muslim community is not at all immune to this, and it's a very hidden thing, it's a very real thing that happens in our homes, in our communities, outside of the world. Just a quick gauge actually before I jump into this, how much time do I have? Is it until like?
Yeah, about 20 minutes.
Okay, that sounds good. I have a case study here, of a 17-year-old boy who's born to immigrant parents. He has been going through financial struggles. His parents argue. He's from war-torn Afghanistan. His older brother died by virtue of gun violence. He experiences flashbacks. He experiences nightmares. He struggles to focus in school. He feels very numb. He's very easily irritated. At times he's aggressive. He has angry outbursts. He feels very anxious. Feels very depressed. Feels very lonely. and at some points has gotten so bad that he wishes his life would end. And so I have a question for the audience. If this person came to you right now, from this masjid or out in the community, wherever it may be, how would you respond to him? And what would you want to ask? To know a bit more about any takers.
So usually, Muslim, of course. You sometimes you can see it on their face sometimes, right? And sometimes, I just say assalamu alaikum, right? Introduce yourself, and you just talk. And then sometimes the conversation will lead to other things. He'll bring the conversation up himself, Usually, sometimes you guys go out to eat, and I stress that you have to be a very positive person when you speak to people that are struggling, mentally, because they're gonna be positive too. When they see you smile, they're gonna smile. You know what I'm saying? And just be near him, remind him of Allah, because when you're next to this man, he's struggling, and it also brings you closer to Allah as well. And you guys are brothers, so you guys can be close to Allah together, and somehow, heal from those traumatic experiences. That's for me, usually.
Absolutely. No, that's beautifully said. A lot of the themes there were this idea of listening, of being by somebody's side, right? Of offering your support, right? Not pushing for advice. I think that's really central to all this as well. A lot of that, what you just mentioned, is embodying the sunnah of the Prophet, right? And being there for those in our community. We'll dive a bit more into that in just a moment. Does anyone know what trauma is? I know I said we'll talk about trauma. Does anyone know what is trauma? It sounds so obvious, but it's like, okay, have we ever actually defined it?
Negative thoughts.
What was that?
Negative thoughts.
Negative thoughts, okay. Negative thoughts.
You experience shock.
Shock.
Struggling from things.
Struggling. Mm-hmm.
The experience you had at a certain point in your life that has an impact. Sometimes you know about it and sometimes you don't know about it.
Right, that's very well said. I'll put the definition up for you guys. It's either an actual or a threatened danger, right? And the thing is, it can be something you've experienced, or it could be something that you've witnessed and not even experienced yourself. That, of course, has a profound impact on your psychology, physiology, all that kind of stuff. The other piece that I think is really crucial that we don't actually talk about enough, that's important for us to understand, is neglect. And neglect is this idea that people grow up in an environment where they feel like their emotions were put down, where they feel like they weren't heard, where they feel like they weren't cared for. And it's a very common thing that we have, people who suffered from neglect years down the line, like they're 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, have a broken self-concept because they grow up in a home where they were constantly invalidated, right? Their emotions were constantly put down. Their struggles were put down because the struggles of their parents or whoever they grew up with was more important than theirs. And so there's this feeling of I didn't matter, and that's what ends up happening. In terms of the impact that trauma can end up having on people, it really does shake us. It can affect our mind, our body, our relationships. And a key thing is if something bad happened in the past, suddenly that thing feels like it's here and right now. Even though it's gone, even though it's not happening anymore, it feels like it's in the present moment. And that's a very, very scary experience to go through. And what does that lead to? What are the impacts of trauma? Things like substance use. I described the first vignette I told you about was, alcohol and in the hospital. That was actually a true story of someone who had just come back from Hajj, and I was consulted to see them in the hospital because they were in withdrawal from alcohol. And I was very shocked when I heard it through the drapes. I heard, the Quran just playing, and it was a Muslim-sounding name, so I was like, okay. But I heard the story, and I was like, this person just came back from Hajj, and this is what they're struggling with here now. It's like, this is someone from our community, and it feels like we failed them, that they're here right now. And it just got me thinking, what are we going to do about that now? Because I guarantee they exist. We just don't know about it, right? Trauma leads to all kinds of negative effects in terms of guilt, shame, depression, anxiety, really bad symptoms. There's a quote on anger that goes, anger is hurt that just didn't know where to go, you know. And anger is a really common, it's manifested really dangerously among men, especially in things like violence, aggression, substances, that kind of stuff. Another piece on suicide, you know, really common things that most of the time it's not that people actually want to die. It's not that they want to physically end their life. It's just that they're so sick of the pain that they're going through that they don't want to live anymore in that. Right? And I've asked this to so many patients. You know, people tell me this when they're thinking about suicide. It's not that they want to die. It's just they're tired of living like this. Do you agree with that? And they say yes. But it's almost never like a genuine death wish. And if you look at the research on people who survived after an attempt, right, there's often a huge feeling of regret, right? And also a feeling of gratitude that, wait a second, I didn't, thank goodness that didn't work. Right? I know these are dark and heavy topics, but I just think that they're really important ones for us to be mindful of because they exist in the Muslim community. You know, I told you about the young man who's has handcuffs on and experiencing chest pain, shortness of breath, intense anxiety, sweating. I still remember an encounter with someone just like that, Muslim as well. And as I spoke to him and as he told me about his situation at home, about his parents, about arguments happening at home, no one believing him, feeling rejected, this person was on their way to jail, you know, and they were crying. And that was one of the toughest things ever. Is imagine, have you ever spoken to someone in handcuffs and you had to go and grab like a paper towel and wipe their tears because they couldn't even wipe their own tears, you know? And these are things that happen out there. These are real struggles of Muslims in our community, non-Muslims as well, of course. And then the question is, what are we going to do about it? Right? How do we build a stronger community? You know, in regards to the case, I know we spoke about it earlier. Judgment-free listening, saying that I'm here for you, helping people find supports, and we'll talk about supports at the end of this so that we know, okay, what do we do? How do we get people the help that they need? In terms of some common conditions, we spoke a bit about depression. You know, when people have extremely low mood, a lack of motivation, they're struggling to get out of bed in the morning. There are some people who literally, to get out of bed, it's like there's a huge weight on your shoulders. It feels impossible to even just go about the day. That's called anhedonia, right? It's an extreme lack of motivation. Anxiety is very intense worry to the point where it's like debilitating. You feel so anxious, so worried, you're so caught up in the future that it's hard to really focus or do anything. Right? Social anxiety is a similar feeling, but in social settings or when giving presentations or being around people in general. And of course, PTSD, usually the consequence of trauma. Now, when it comes to seeking help, this is a model that they, if you cut off the bottom part, actually the mouse will work on this thing, or I can't use the cursor, but usually in the world of psychology they use like a triangle, so they say the bio, psycho, and social. So biological, your body, psychological, like your mind, and social, But I think what's so crucial, especially when we're here in Masjid, I always talk about the spiritual side of things too. Simple advice. It's funny when people ask me for practical tips and advice, my mind comes back to like the most basic of things. Things like, how's your sleep? How's your diet? Are you exercising? If we were to talk about like the biggest pieces of advice you could give to anyone to promote good health, I just named 3 of them right there, right? Sleep, good diet, good exercise, non-smoking, not drinking alcohol, right? Alhamdulillah, alcohol, even though we say, it's haram and things like that, a lot of Muslims do, right? But those 5 pieces of advice right there could prevent like the vast majority of the most dangerous illnesses that exist, from heart disease to suicide to any sort of mental health struggles, like just so many things right there. Psychological is like related to our thoughts, our feelings, our mind, and the way we think about things. Right? So we have to take care of our minds. The social is connection, and that's why it's really key for us to remember this, especially in a Masjid community, because here we are, alhamdulillah, like it's 7 in the morning on a Saturday, and we have this beautiful group of brothers and sisters here who came for a reason. You guys came here for a reason. I wish this same conversation could be had with all those who weren't able to be here, right? Because I think everyone needs to hear it and know. And also to feel the sense of connection. Because I imagine there's some degree of unity that exists among this group that decides to come here for Fajar and to be here in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? There are people in the Muslim community who feel too guilty to do that, who feel too afraid. There's an element of shame where they're like, I don't know if my prayers are even being answered. What do I do? Right? They're praying in the silence of their homes. They might be praying tahajjud at night. They're struggling on their own, but they wish they could be in a place like this, but they just have an element of, I can't. I don't know how. Right? What will people say to me? So that is our challenge to address, and it's not an easy one. But the last slide I go into before we give some chance for questions, we'll touch a bit about this, is what does healing look like? And there's an analogy that I like to use that I think really resonates with people. If someone gets a cut, they get a big cut, and it's bleeding out, and they go to the emergency department, what does the doctor do? For anyone who's done that before, or what is your guess? What does the doctor do? They have a big cut, it's bleeding, and it's so big that, they come to a doctor. What does the doctor do?
Stop the bleeding.
They stop the bleeding, right? So they stop the bleeding, they rinse it out, they put gauze, stuff like that. They're like, okay, let's control this, let's stop this thing from bleeding. And then what do they do if it's big enough that it's probably not going to heal on its own? What do?
Stitch it.
They stitch it, right? And I've done that many times. I've stitched people up in the emergency department. And then what happens?
They don't ask why it happened.
Yeah, they don't ask, or maybe they'll know the story, just to know where did you get that cut, how did you get that cut? But they stop the bleeding, they put some gauze, they rinse it out, they clean it out, they stitch it, and then a couple of weeks later, that person's wound, generally speaking, is healed. Right? But after they've stitched it, what do? Go home, take care of yourself. The key part in what I'm trying to describe here is that sure, the doctor does the rinsing, and sure, they go and put the stitches, but where does the healing happen? Where does that wound seal itself? Is the doctor doing that?
No.
Is the doctor saying they're trying to heal their wound? They're not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing that, right? That healing is not happening by the doctor. Sure, they put the stitches, they helped in that process, but they're not the end, they're not the means by which that healing happens. They just brought one piece of skin together with another piece of skin. And then the rest happens by virtue of the mercy of Allah, right? The key thing when it comes to mental health, right, is using a very similar analogy, and there's research that's being done in the modern world about certain medications that they use to open people up to experiences. The issue we have, and this is really common among men, but it happens among women as well, is numbing. Is numbing, escapism, not talking about things. What we end up doing is, there's a lot of wounds inside of us that want to bleed, right? Or are trying to bleed. There's all this pain, this trauma, these emotional wounds and things like that. But we just close them up and bottle them up and put them away, when really they need a chance to heal. And sometimes that healing actually comes from giving ourselves a chance to let that hurt show up, right? It'd be very odd if someone got a cut like that, and they just wrapped it up with something and then didn't look at it or think about it, and it's just bleeding underneath constantly. You think, why would you do that, right? Why would you choose not to go? Why would you let it keep bleeding? You could die from that, right? If you just kind of cover it up enough. But we do the same thing with mental health. We do exactly that. We do that when we say we should never do with physical health, which is to let the bleeding keep happening, to not put on those stitches. And those stitches can be in the form of talking to someone. Those stitches can be in the form of reconnecting with the Muslim community, with the Masjid. Those stitches can be in the form of speaking to a doctor, to a psychologist, to an imam, right? The idea is there needs to be some sort of spark, and it's okay to seek help. And it doesn't have to be that someone is on the brink of suicide at the very end, where they feel really hopeless that they need to go out and seek help. And then the big question comes to us as a community is, how can we, of course help people, help stitch those wounds, but also how can we prevent those wounds from happening in the first place, right? Or how can we jump in early enough that when people are struggling and they're going through a tough time and they could lead to something bad, how do we step in and say, wait a second, let's work on this together? And these are hypothetical and theoretical questions. On a practical level, it comes down to unity, it comes down to our community, it comes down to how we support each other. It comes down to how we are as listeners. I'll end off with one little story, and I've shared it in another gathering too, was I had a man who had just come back from open heart surgery, who I saw in the clinic. And as I was walking, he said, hello, my name is Dr. Taha, it's nice to meet you. And I said, how are you? And he got frustrated at me. He's like, do you really care if you're asking me how are you? Or is it just, you just ask everybody that, so what the heck? And it took me aback because, I always ask my patients, how are you doing? And, what's going on? But he said, everybody asks that, whatever, you don't actually care, blah, blah, blah. He got mad at me. And I said, wait a second. I paused in the middle of the hallway. And I said, I really do want to know how you're doing. I know you just had a surgery a week ago. And let's sit down and talk about it. Right? And he opened up. He shared about what he's going through. Of course, he just had a physical surgery. There was a lot going on. There's a lot of mental health challenges going on too. And it reminded me of an article I read that speaks to, what we say in Arabic. How do you ask someone, how are you doing in Arabic? Kayf hal, right? And English does not have the equivalent of what that really means, because in English we say, how are you doing? But kayf haluk speaks to the hal, which is like on a deeper level, right? Like your soul, your being, your state of being. And so sometimes when I want to get a little deeper with my friends, I'll say, how are you? Like, how's your heart? I'll be like, it's beating. It's like, okay, alhamdulillah, I sure hope it is. The next piece is like, how are you really doing on the inside? How are you really doing on the inside? Like, tell me, like, what's good, what's bad, what's in between. A very easy exercise if you just want a tidbit. I told you to write down the nasiha number. Maybe this is one other exercise you can write down and try doing this with your friends, your colleagues, your family. Has anyone heard of the exercise called Rose, Thorn, and Bud? Anyone heard of that before? Raise your hand if you've heard of it before. One. Okay, good. So this is useful for everybody else, right? So it's called Rose, Thorn, and Bud. I started doing it with my family at the dinner table, but I think this is a great thing you can do with your family at the dinner table, at the masjid. You can try it today when you're at Breakfast Club and you're talking to each other. I would actually say try this, okay? Very simple exercise. Rose is something good that's happened, either in the past day, and the day just started, in the past week, in the past month. The idea is speak to something positive, right? What was a happy thing, a joyful thing, something exciting? Thorn is, what are you struggling with? What's tough right now? What are the difficulties? What were the lows of your week? Right? Tell me about the thorns. And then the bud is, what are you looking forward to? What are you hopeful about? What are you excited about in the days or weeks or months ahead? It's a really simple exercise, but it's a nice way to just open up a conversation with someone. And even if you don't know them well, maybe you do know them well, right? The better you know someone, the deeper they might go with the thorns, right? With the buds as well. It's a very simple exercise to get a chance to open up, to talk about things, to break the ice with important conversations. I know this is the last slide I have over here is resources. So Nasiha, again, our booth is at the back. It's a toll-free, anonymous, confidential helpline, so people can call in, they can send texts and speak to one of our peer counselors. And I urge you guys, at least take one bookmark just so you have that number to keep at home or share with someone else. The Suicide and Crisis Lifeline here in the United States is 988, so you can reach out to that number if you ever need support as well. They operate 24/7. And also the US Crisis Text Line is another one, so you can text home to that number that's listed and speak to someone. So if you want a Muslim-centric helpline, Nasiha is the one to go to, and I highly encourage you to reach out to Nasiha. And if you guys want to pull out your phone and take a picture of this just so you have the numbers written down, I think that might be very helpful for those who want to take that down. That's all I had to share in terms of formal talk for now. But I wanted to give the audience a chance, inshallah, to ask any questions that you might have before we go and break for breakfast. Or if you don't want to ask questions, we can just jump to breakfast. Yes? Wa alaikum salam.
I know it's a lot when people go through issues. Because I'm a very observing person, right? And I watch how people, communicate with each other, especially when somebody has a mental, crisis. You have to pick and choose what words you use at that particular moment. And you have to have wisdom, a lot of wisdom to speak to people like that. You know what I'm saying? Some people should not speak to other people with mental issues. Because unfortunately, this person will get worse. You know what I'm saying? That's what I want to say.
It's true. It's true. We have to be cautious, right? Like the things we say and the things we don't say. Like someone who's really depressed on, oh, just cheer up, or you have so much to be grateful for. It can put them off. They don't want to open up to you if they hear that. So being, conscientious is really important. It's funny. I find that kids are the ones that'll be the most frank about things. Like if they like, oh, you look fat, like they'll just say that. Even if you're really insulting to someone, right? Or they just call things out. So we have to not be like kids. We have to be like mature adults when it comes to having these conversations. I think it's a pretty safe and open-ended question to just be like, hey, how are you doing? The rose thorn bud way is a really easy way to do it without being judgmental. Try to ask questions and offer support in a very open, non-judgmental way. I think that's like the key. Look into the sunnah of the Prophet and embody that in how you speak to others. I think that's a key way to do it.
Okay, I got something else.
So we'll just get the other brothers.
Oh,
You go there and here.
In terms of supporting this initiative, I'm sure financially there must be a bar monthly, but if somebody wanted to volunteer, is there like a training to become a hotline representative, or you have to be like only like a clinical psychologist or?
So we have a sign-up list at the back, so you can sign up to be on the volunteer list, and we can reach out to you. On the website, there's an application for getting involved if you're interested in being a counselor. We have kind of raised the bar in terms of who we allow to be a counselor because the nature of the issues we see is just getting more and more intense and difficult. At the same time, I wouldn't discourage people from trying to apply to be a counselor. So look into it.
And just a follow-up, is there like a video or resource for parents or just general community members of like, talking to your kids one-on-one or just like an introduction, and if it's more advanced or something to refer it out?
That is a good question. Do I know of any specific Nasiha produced videos? Not necessarily. But in general, there are some resources. So when you go to Masjid at the back, just say like, I wanted some resources, we'll send you some stuff, inshallah. I'll be happy to. Yes?
Look at for your presentation. A lot of people from the community oftentimes have trauma from the community, and we can list
Right.
whether it be like cultural trauma or like religious trauma that manifests in different ways that push people away from the community. So I'm wondering, I guess one thing is what recommendations or advice would you give to the community itself to often, do we have a role in that kind of healing when oftentimes we were the cause of that hurt?
That's a really good question. And I don't have a magical answer to that one. But I think what I can say is, we should play a role in the healing, right? Let's say you were, having a play fight with your friends as a kid, and you actually punch someone a little too hard, and they ended up getting a fracture or something like that, or you cut them by accident, they needed sutures or whatever, they went to the emerge. You played a role in that, even if it was by accident, right? There's a role that you played. And it's like, even if it's just taking them to the emergency, even if it's just like, hey, let's get you the help, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. The issue where it gets complicated with cultural trauma and stuff like that is like, you don't know what you've done that could have harmed somebody. But the piece we can do is to still unite as a community and offer our support, right? And if that means being a little less judgmental, a little more open to hearing people's struggles, talking about resources like Nasiha, having these deep conversations, like at MSAs, we've gone and done these things called Nasiha circles, where people actually open up, we get the audience to start talking about, I know I shared stories of what I've seen, but we got everyone else to start talking about struggles, and we got people to submit those things anonymously as well, so that you don't necessarily get put on the spot, but whatever issue you were going through, at least we had a chance to talk about it, right? We could do the same thing in the Masjid, why not? Right? Do a Masjid circle, and have people submit it on Google Docs or whatever. Have someone facilitate a conversation, but you don't know who is who. Keep it anonymous, but still have those conversations. So the healing can happen in a safe way without putting people on the spot, while still offering that support.
I know you emphasized on this part, but let's say someone who is drinking alcohol or have any form of addiction, physical addiction whatsoever. So it is both, it is sin and it is harmful. He has this idea, I shouldn't be discussing my sins with anyone because this is Islam, I only talk to Allah. So how do you respond to someone who says this?
Absolutely, that's a great question. And there's certain substances, whether it's alcohol or opioids or things like that, that it's a really important conversation to have because overdosing on these things, or also going through withdrawal, like if you just quit cold turkey, it's actually so dangerous it can kill you, right? Like it's actually fatal. The deaths that we have each year from alcohol and other substances in Canada and the United States is extremely high. Like it's far higher than suicide, right? It costs the healthcare system and our economy on a whole like billions of dollars each year. Now, how do we have that conversation? Well, as a community, I think when we know that someone in our community is healing, whether they're struggling with sin or not struggling with sin, it would be really naive to be like, oh, just go and quit cold turkey. When the reality is, if this is something they've been struggling with so long, it's not going to be that easy, right? We always assess something, and you don't have to be a psychologist to do this, right? But something called like motivation to change, which is the idea of where is someone at in terms of their journey going through whatever struggle. Like if someone doesn't pray 5 times a day, they don't pray at all, right? It would be pretty hardcore for us to push that you need to pray 5 times a day, you need to wake up for tahajjud, you need to do all these extra things, you need to read like 1 juz of Quran every day. Maybe they don't even know how to read Quran, right? Maybe they don't even know how to pray, right? Where do you start? And that's, I think, the critical question to ask, even with something like substances, right? Is, okay, not even judging them for what they're doing, but instead saying, like, where does this come from? And also, where are you at? Is this something you want to change? Is this something you're struggling with? How can I support you? Like, a very open-ended question, right? But I think the key part is for us to not be judgmental as a Muslim community, to offer unbiased support. That's why us as doctors, people come to us because they're like, hey, I couldn't trust anybody else, but I can share this with you. We got to be that same person for everyone in our community as well. Is to be approachable and let people have these conversations, right? There's a story, that we know, of that companion who was like urinating in the masjid. You guys know about that, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, like, the companions were like ready to like beat him up and be like, okay, get him out of here. Why would you do this in the masjid? And what did the Prophet ﷺ do? He let him finish what he was doing, right? Truly an act of humility there to say, wait, let him finish, let him relieve himself, and then we'll talk about it after, right? So that is like the essence of prophetic, counseling, support, friendship, companionship, is all these things, is have a sense of humility towards those who are around us. Maybe people don't even know, right? And just taking it from there. I hope that helps answer.
Yeah, you mentioned alcohol addiction, substance addiction. I feel like most of the time people say I'm not in this zone, but I would say a very large percentage of the Muslim population has visual addiction in some sort or another. And they're like, there's no withdrawal symptoms. I'm not going to die if I let it go for a couple of months. But it is something you see kids who have addiction with video games, or adults who have addiction to movies or certain type of stuff. They feel like it is very, I don't have enough courage to discuss it with someone. So I think when you said it should be like the circles in the community or open venues, so that to speak, is very nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Muslim community, if we don't see alcohol, if we don't see substance, that stuff may not show up. It's the stuff that shows up in the hospitals or in the the addictions clinics and things like that. Even though it exists right here, it just doesn't show up here because it's so hard to talk about. But behavioral struggles, like gaming addiction is a huge one. Also things like viewing inappropriate things online, that's a massive one in the Muslim community. We get so many calls related to this as well. People have never spoken to anyone. The withdrawal symptoms, no, they won't kill you, right? But they're extremely uncomfortable for people, and they can go on for a long time. So helping people, get on the right track, it comes from being non-judgmental and supportive. Absolutely. I'm just going to give him a chance just because he hasn't asked a question yet.
Last question.
Okay.
So since you are coming from Florida, which is densely immigrant populated community, what advice you would suggest for the parents to look after their kids? Because they grew up in a different culture environment. Their parents coming from Pakistan, India, and some continent versus this culture here, and they see things differently. Like how they handle their kids in that environment.
I think all the questions we got today were amazing, and this is, I would say, the most important question that's been asked today, right? Is like, okay, what do parents do? Because we're talking about our future generation, our youth, the children, and the future, right, of the Muslim Ummah. What do we do to support them, given there's this huge generational gap? And, it sounds so, the answer is quite simple, but implementing is so hard. Because parents have grown up in a world where, for example, they may have been beaten up if they weren't listening, right? Things were really rough at school, where they get a like a ruler and they kick your hands if you didn't get X number of questions right on the test, or you get like 98%, and instead of like congratulating the child on the 98%, where's the 2%? Right? That's the way they talk. Or they talk about their struggles and they're like, wait, I went through this. Or when I was studying at night, I used to use like a lamp, and I would crank whatever to study in the darkness. So you have all this light and things are wonderful. There's this constant, I think parents carry so much trauma, but they never had a chance to talk about it. That's the issue. There is so much trauma in our communities, right? Whether it's like, why do you have to one-up your child to prove that your struggles were bigger than theirs? Right? Why are we doing that? That's a serious problem in our community. Why do you have to go and validate yourself in front of a kid who's struggling? Or put your struggles above theirs? That's a serious psychological issue. Go seek support for that. Your child should not be your therapist or your wall to punch. Right? That is key. And I know I'm being pretty harsh in how I'm saying this, but I think it's really, really, really important. I don't have children of my own. I have a nephew who's almost 3 years old. And it makes me very happy to see the way my brother and my sister-in-law are raising him, because they're breaking these kinds of intergenerational patterns that used to exist. They're very smart about how they talk to him. With young kids, the key thing is actually getting them to verbalize their emotions, right? Instead of like telling them to be quiet or don't cry and all these things, actually let them cry and then say, hey, how are you feeling? Right? If they're nagging you for something, instead of just giving it to them, right? You teach them how to use their words. The simple things, to help children while they're developing goes a huge way in changing their psychology. And the other piece is, and we didn't touch too much about this. I spoke about neglect. I spoke about complex trauma and how, when people don't feel heard, when they don't feel like their emotions are validated, it manifests in all kinds of issues in the future. So if kids feel heard, they have a warm place to go. They feel like they can hug their parents, feel supported by their parents, and that doesn't just have to be mom, that should be dad as well, right? It has to go both ways. They feel safe enough that they can talk to you about things they otherwise probably wouldn't talk about. And that will go a long way in changing their future, really. So I know, it's a really complex question, and we could do a whole talk on discussing that alone, but in a nutshell, I would say create a world of safety. Don't trauma dump on kids. This goes to everybody. No more trauma dumping on children, right? Let them be in their world and validate their struggles as uniquely theirs, and take it from there, inshallah. I hope that helps. Okay, well, we'll end the talk there. Inshallah, jazakallah khair to everyone for attending. I hope that was useful. And please check out the booth at the back if you have any further questions. If you want to ask me questions personally, you can come by and speak to me as well, inshallah.
यूट्यूब पे डाल दें। हाँ जी।